Hello and welcome to Market Cafe with me, Ankita Saxena, and with me is Snehi Shah. This is a fresh day of trades and a fresh week, but the news that made headlines through the weekend was, of course, the G20 summit. And Snehi, India's presidency, that has led to some monumentous changes in G20 itself. You know, the induction of the African Union in G20. Absolutely. And of course, the Delhi declaration that came out with 100% consensus. Big monumentous changes coming in there, and all under India's presidency.
Absolutely big momentous changes coming in, and it's very prestigious when it comes to India, whatever's happened over the weekend. And Prime Minister Modi has also handed over the gavel of G20 presidency to Brazil President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Indonesian President and Brazilian President Lula, representing the G20 presidencies of last year and next year, hand over a sapling to each other and to current chair PM Modi. First up, let's listen in to what PM Modi had to say at the summit.
वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर का रोड मैप सुखद हो। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य, यानी संपूर्ण विश्व में आशा और शांति का संचार हो। 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की इसी मंगल कामना के साथ आप सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
And well, Itina also caught up exclusively with the DEA Secretary Ajay Seth to understand the key outcomes of the summit. Listen into what he had to say on the interaction he had with my colleague Sumit Chaturvedi.
So when you ask that consensus has been reached on a number of issues, that's the outcome. And be it for strengthening multilateral banks or finding a policy framework for assessing risk about crypto assets, or the building blocks for regulating them, as well as a roadmap of implementing those regulations. Third element has been that how digital public infrastructure can play a very strong role on financial inclusion as well as on productivity gains in the private sector. If I have to list three, these will be the three most prominent ones, but there are a number of others ones. If you can just add one or two more in this particular one, that under the Indian presidency, instead of speaking for infrastructure, talking about infrastructure in general, we brought in a very people-centric theme of sustainable financing cities of tomorrow. And it's not just in developing countries, but even in advanced economies, where the cities have to become a much more energy efficient, what it means for them, what kind of changes it would be required, how to do the financing, what are the policy prescriptions, those have been agreed. MDBs have been asked that in their work, including in their financing, they should factor those things. So that will be the fourth element where there has been a strong work. Fifth word to put in is to bring a very balanced discourse on climate financing and on sustainable development goal financing. These will be, if I have to list 4 or 5, the most prominent one, and as Honorable Finance Minister had spoken yesterday, there's a long list.
So on the issue of crypto, so where do we stand and what's the roadmap there? And in India, as far as RBI is concerned, it has proposed a ban. On that issue, domestic regulations, how free are we and what has happened on crypto?
We are discussing today is what has happened or what are the achievements in the G20 summit, which has just got closed today. And a consensus on assessment on the policy prescriptions on handling crypto assets and the regulations. Based on the consensus which India has succeeded to build there, now we'll have to assess those recommendations, see those recommendations vis-a-vis our own economy, and then take a considered view.
And to risk to Indian economy, sir, any other issue that has emerged so far as we are connected to the global economy? And do we need to worry about anything in all those meetings? Any of these sort of concerns have come up?
So there's a huge set of responsibility, and as we say that the presidency is till 30th November, so we still have a lot of work to do. And finance track meetings are there. In this month there are a number of meetings. Then next month is the ministerial meeting is coming up. So we have a lot of work to do. Until then, G20 process will be on, and beyond that, then we'll have to take forward and be an active participants on the issues which concerns us and issues which concerns global South.
This is one of the rare documents in the history of multilaterals where you have 20 countries, all of them agreeing on every single issue, including the geopolitical issue of Russia-Ukraine. There is It's no chair summary. There is no footnote. Everyone has a consensus. Every single para has a consensus. Every word has a consensus. And this really, truly demonstrates India's unique leadership and Prime Minister's great leadership in bringing the whole world together. So this is a moment when the developing countries joined hands with India, the developed world joined hands with India, and Russia, China, everyone joined hands with India on all aspects of development, of growth, of progress, as well as on geopolitical issues. So this is truly, to my mind, this is a unique moment for India. Also, there were various challenges. There was a challenge on some of the India narrative that we wanted to bring in, like Vasudev Kutumbakam, life, lifestyle for environment. There was a challenge on women-led development, etc. And there was a huge challenge on the climate side, where the developing countries' perspective was not being taken care of. We brought it all together because if this document is powerful because it speaks the voice of the developing nation. It speaks the voice of the global south, and it speaks the voice of the emerging markets. And to that extent, this is a very, very powerful document, which for the first time demonstrates that actually we can bring the developing world together and bring their concerns to the table. And that's what India has done really in this document. Bali had a footnote. Even the Ukraine para it was a split para. It was a split para because it talked about most members, some members, few members. But the Prime Minister told us that G20 of India must have been consensus driven. Consensus has to be the basic foundation of G20. And therefore, there was no option but to work around bringing everybody to a consensus and ensuring that multilateralism functions well when everybody is ambitious, everyone is inclusive, and yet everybody is able to build a consensus. And that's what we've done also in the Russia-Ukraine para. We brought back the strength of G20. We brought back the ambition of G20. We've made it a very, very inclusive body now. And it really is a voice of the global south in this entire document. If you read it very carefully, it's from the preamble itself, it is speaking the voice of the global south.
I think on climate change as a whole, a lot of progress was made at this G20 summit. First of all, we got the world to the G20 to reaffirm the target of 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is a sort of a shrinking window, but still achievable if the world really puts its head down and moves towards it. As you know, G20 countries represent almost 80% of carbon emissions. So it's really important what this group really tries to do and think. So that is one very important. The second very important was that the G20 also reaffirmed that the world should get to net zero by 2050, which means that if some countries like India and China get there in 2060 and 2070, that means other countries will have to get there earlier for us to get the globe as a whole to get to net zero by 2050. That's a very, very important step forward. And I'm just hoping that a lot of these targets will be taken forward at COP28 that is going to be held in the next couple of months in Dubai. So it's really created a very strong platform for that. The third very important thing was the fact that there was this consensus that the green hydrogen area really needs to be moved forward much faster. And for that, there were a number of things that have been spelled out, including, for example, agreeing to the definition of green hydrogen, getting a green hydrogen innovation center set up under the ISA.
And with that, it's time for a quick breather. Don't go anywhere. There's lots more coming up on the other side.
Hi there, welcome back. You're watching Market Cafe on ET Now. Now let's take a look at what the global markets have done over last week and what they're doing this morning as well when it comes to Asia. But first, let's start with the US markets then. And stock futures were little changed on Sunday night as investors awaited a batch of economic data in the week to come and earnings from two major tech companies. Now on Friday, stocks finished a down week on a high note. The Dow gained almost 0.2% while the S&P edged higher by 0.1% to snap a 3-day losing streak. streak. Now, the Nasdaq Composite eked out marginal gains. All three indices posted a losing week. However, it was the first negative week in 3 for the S&P and Nasdaq. Now, investors are looking forward to key inflation data in the week ahead after a string of stronger than expected economic data points in the last week, which renewed worries that the Fed Reserve could raise rates more than what was previously expected. Traders are pricing in a roughly 4 in 10 chance of an increase in November after an anticipated pause in September, according to CME Group's Fed Watch tool. Also, lots of other important data to watch out for as well. Wednesday and Thursday bring the latest consumer price index and producer price index readings at CPI and PPI respectively. Investors are hoping for low readings, although both are expected to jump due to energy cost pressures. Retail sales data is also expected on Thursday, and the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Survey will be released on Friday, which should give an insight on how well spending could hold up for the rest of the year for the US. Elsewhere, investors are also getting financial updates from two big tech giants, Oracle on Monday and Adobe on Thursday. Apple now will also be in the spotlight because it will be holding its product event on Tuesday dubbed Wanderlust, during which the company is widely anticipated to unveil the iPhone 15. Now remember, Apple as a stock is also coming off from a low last week after the news of Chinese government officials not being allowed to use as iPhones had come out in the market. So we'll also see how that pans out for the Apple stock as well as the US markets. But let's also take note of the Asian market then, Ankita. Asian markets have opened up this morning. Tell us how they're doing.
Snehi, Asian markets have opened up, and most of the Asian markets have opened up, in the red. And we have some important data numbers that will be coming out from our markets. We have some key economic data, which is, that is going to take the center stage. On Tuesday, we are expecting India to release the inflation and industrial output figures for the month of August, while China will announce its industrial output, retail sales, and most notably the house sale price on Friday. So, I beg your pardon, India and China will be coming out with important data points. But for now, Shanghai is just 15 points up. It is pretty flat right now. It is in the green, but other markets are down. Hang Seng has a cut of 214 points coming in there, and Nikkei had opened around the flat line. Kospi is absolutely flat, just up 4 points. Nikkei opened up next to the flat line, but is down 72 points now. GIFT Nifty is bucking the trend, is up 58 points. ASX 200 again in the red, very flat, but down 6 points. And if you look at the US stock futures also, absolutely flat. It is absolutely flat. But the GIFT Nifty is bucking the trend, is up 58 points, hinting towards, a positive start for the Indian markets with a positive bias for now, Snehi.
Absolutely. 99.38, we are almost inching closer to that 20,000 mark. So let's see if we hit that during this week. Yes. But let's also take stock of what oil did then, and oil prices gained almost 1% to a 9-month high on Friday on rising US diesel futures and worries about tight oil supplies after Saudi Arabia and Russia, remember, they had extended supply cuts last week. Both crude benchmarks remained in technically overbought territory for a 6th straight day, with Brent on track for its highest close since the 16th of November. Now, WTI's close has been its highest since the 6th of September, when it settled at its highest price since November last year. Now, for both the week, both benchmarks were up about 2%, following gains last week of about 5% for Brent and about 7% coming in for WTI crude. Now, currently, Brent crude is just toeing that $90 per barrel line. It's still at 90, but let's see if it can hold on to that level. And WTI currently at that $86.9 per barrel mark. So that's largely what crude is looking like. Let's see how crude prices inch out going towards ahead this week.
All right, then we'll move on to the big news flows coming in. US President Joe Biden held his highest level talk with Chinese Premier Lee Quang on the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi, speaking about the major issues like stability and the South Hamshire. Remember, such a meeting took place after nearly 10 months. Meanwhile, Biden later called China's economic situation as a crisis, and this makes their invasion in Taiwan less likely.
And following strong demand from investors, the SoftBank Group-owned chip designer ARM will likely be able to price the IPO at the top or above its $47 to $51 per share range, according to Reuters. Now, the company, however, will not offer more shares given that SoftBank wants to retain its 90.6% stake in the company.
And another setback for Alibaba Group, Daniel Jang is stepping down as the CEO of the company's cloud division, reports suggest. Remember, this comes in less than 9 months after he took over the cloud unit.
And shifting gears, as per reports, Vietnam Airlines is expected to ink an agreement to buy about 50 Boeing 737 MAX jets in a deal valued at $7.5 billion. This prospective deal will be seen as a significant development for Boeing, as it would enable the US carrier to retire over 40 older generation Airbus SE A321 planes.
A Morocco earthquake has recorded around 2,000 deaths and around 2,400 injuries, according to the latest update from the Moroccan Interior Minister. Moroccan troops and emergency services were reportedly struggling to reach the most affected areas in the Atlas Mountains region. Meanwhile, France, Spain and Israel have extended support to Morocco for rescue and rehabilitation of the affected people.
And well, what a morning it's been coming in from New York, because it's 24 and counting for the tennis GOAT Novak Djokovic. At the age of 36, the Serb has shattered all records once again to clinch his 24th Grand Slam title and reclaim that top seed spot, shattering Daniil Medvedev's streak after a stellar comeback in the US Open. Now, this is Djoko's third Grand Slam this year alone and the oldest person to win the US Open title ever. Even though the finals lasted for just 3 sets, it was a grueling one, with Medvedev giving it his all. And after winning the title, Djokovic donned a shirt with number 24 and Mamba Forever written on it as a tribute to the late NBA star Kobe Bryant, who wore that jersey number.
Alright, then let's quickly take you through the lineup that we have on the market for you. First up at 9:20 a.m. we have Devina Mehra of First Global on her corner of the street and going ahead how the markets are likely to pan out. At 9:30 a.m. we have Rajesh Prasad of Rail Vikas Nigam on the company being on the fast track. At 9:40 a.m. we have Shishir Joshipura of Praj Industries on the Biofuels Alliance boost coming in there. And at 9:50 a.m. we have Girish Koski of PNB Housing Finance on the growth roadmap ahead for the company. At 10 a.m. we have Atul Goyal of Brigade Enterprises on the big infra chair. And finally at 10:20 a.m. we have Bino Parma Pil of Elara Capital on the big capex push. Welcome back, here watching Market Cafe, and let's shift gears and look at CAMS Analyst Day. CAMS is a register and transfer agent for mutual funds, and some key expectations have been discussed about the business. Somit is here with all the key highlights. Take it away, Somit.
Well, if you see, CAMS is a registrar and transfer agent for mutual funds and has nearly 69% market share in this business. Now, it is an oligopoly market, and the company generates nearly 87% of its revenue by being an RTA. Now, over this business, over the medium term, the company is expecting its revenue to grow nearly 12%, while its AUM is expected to grow nearly 15% despite having a large base in the industry. Now, CAMS also said that in its analyst meet that it has nearly completed its investment when it comes to the new initiative businesses, which include insurance repository, account aggregator, AIFs and KYC services. Now, the management is expecting a 20% revenue growth when it comes to these new business initiatives, and it is saying that the revenue opportunity for these new business initiatives stands at around 70 to 100 crore over the medium term. Overall, the company is expecting its revenue to grow at a 14% CAGR over the medium term, and it is comfortable with an EBITDA margin of nearly 44 to 45% over the next few years. Now, the company also mentioned that the profitability will remain intact despite the fact that there is yield compression in the RTA business, and this will be largely on the back of increasing of scale of business. The company is confident that its profitability will remain intact.
Alright, Somi, thanks so much for taking us through that. We will keep an eye out on CAMS. Remember, CAMS was a stock that closed almost 1% higher on Friday. We'll see how that pans out for CAMS today. But in big news coming over the weekend, then Reliance Industries has teamed up with US-based chip maker NVIDIA to develop AI infrastructure in India. Now, the two companies will together develop India's own foundation large language model trained on India's diverse languages and tailored for generative AI applications. My colleague Anurag Joshi is joining in with more details on this. Anurag, take it away.
Conglomerate Reliance Industries has tied up with NVIDIA, one of Silicon Valley's key AI services firm. Reliance and NVIDIA plan to advance AI in India, and they plan to build a supercomputing infrastructure which will support the exponential computational demands of AI in the country. Now, the NVIDIA planned AI infrastructure will be the foundation for Reliance Jio Infocom's foray into AI, and the firm plans to develop India's own languages model, which is trained on India's languages and also tailored to AI applications. And this proposed AI infrastructure, which Reliance and NVIDIA plan to build, is touted as more powerful than the fastest supercomputer currently in India.
And with that, it's time to slip into a short break. After the break, we get you all the stocks that you need to keep on your radar for today's trading session. Welcome back. Here watching Market Cafe, and it is that time of the show where we tell you all the stocks to watch out for and to keep on your radar for today's trading session. But first up, we'll tell you how the F&O market, how the F&O snapshot looks like. And for that, we have Ansh in the studio with us. Ansh, take us through all the positions for F&O. It is the start of the week. Take us through all of that.
Sure. So, good morning. So Nifty advanced for 6 consecutive sessions, touching a 6-week high as well. Also, the index closed about 19,800 after over a month. However, index faced some resistance at 19,850, like we discussed in the previous session as well. So on upside, first hurdle seems to be at 19,850 level, followed by the psychological level of 20,000 mark. Now let's see what happened in F&O segment. Mild short covering was seen in Nifty futures with open interest declining by around 0.91%. This keeps the sentiment neutral. Whereas on option front, we see active call buying at 20,000 strike, whereas some put writing at 19,800 followed by 19,700. This indicates that option traders are expecting Nifty to have good support at 19,800 and 19,700. And on upside, they're expecting Nifty to climb over 20,000 level by this weekly expiry. Now let's shift our focus to what FIS did. Index future, FII covered 2,200 short contracts. They added 2,300 long contracts. So we can say there was a net increase of around 4,500 long contracts on upside, which is a positive factor. Hence, we see FII total long position inched up by from 57% to 58%. So in a nutshell, F&O data seems mixed and suggesting a range of around 19,700 to 20,000. A decisive breach of 19,850 will open upside for record highs, which is around 20,000 level. Also on downside, we see good support seems to be around 19,650 to 19,700 level.
Alright, Ansh, we'll see if Nifty is able to breach that 20,000 mark by this expiry, which is on Thursday. But amid all this uptake, what are the stocks that you think that our viewers should be keeping on their radar this morning? Take us through all of that.
Sure. So Vakrangi will be the first stock in focus for today's trading session, as company has agreed with Avishka India investors to get 48.5% of Vortex Engineering. They are spending nearly 18 crores for this deal to improve their ATM business. Apart from this, SGVN will also be in focus, as company has made a deal with Bhakra Bees Management Board to make 18 megawatt of solar power in Himachal Pradesh and Punjab. This project is expected to finish by August 2024. Strides Pharma will also be in focus, as company has received approval from US FDA to sell Sevelamer carbonate for oral suspension. This will be available in market soon. Dilip Bilkon and Patel Engineering will also be in focus, as they have signed an agreement with Water Resource Department in Madhya Pradesh for a project costing 1,275 crore. Shyam Metallics will also be in focus, as they have shared operational updates for the month of August. Sponge iron volume has decreased by 5% on year-on-year basis, whereas steel billet volume has also decreased by 37%. Long steel, which includes products like TMT, wire rods and structurals, also saw a decline of around 19-20%. Lastly, IRB Infrastructure in August collected nearly 417 crore in tolls, showing a 24% increase on year-on-year basis. So keep an eye on the stocks.
All right, thank you so much for that, Ansh. We will keep all the stocks on our radar for today's trading session. But moving on, The RBI is discontinuing the ICRR in a phased manner. What will be the impact on banks' NIIs? Well, Vamakshi is joining in with more details on that. Do take us through all those details, Vamakshi.
Well, yes, the RBI has decided to discontinue the ICRR, and this has been taken ahead in a phased manner to avoid any sudden liquidity shock to the system. In fact, if you remember, ICRR was implemented on August 12th, and in fact, this was done in order to address the surge in liquidity following the return of nearly 90% of 2000 rupee notes into the banking system. Now, what Investec is estimating is that the outer limit impact on the system NII, that is the net interest income, would have been around 1,200 odd crores. HDFC Bank, particularly the merged entity, the net interest income, however, is expected to get impacted by nearly 2%. In fact, data from RBI's daily CRR disclosures suggest that HDFC Bank did not get any exception to account for the merger with HDFC Limited. The bank was anyway expected to create CRR as well as SLR reserves on the grandfathered liabilities that were transferred to HDFC Bank. However, the data from RBI suggests that there was an increase in the CRR on 12th of August to the tune of 1.5 lakh crore, and this can only imply that HDFC Bank had to create ICRR on the entire grandfathered NDTL. Now, as we saw, the impact on HDFC Bank was around 2%, but it is expected to be nearly 0.4% for Kotak, 0.3% for ICICI Bank as well as SBI. Now, as far as some of the other large banks are concerned, the impact is expected to be even lower in the range of 0.1 to 0.2% of the NIIs. Now, as far as Axis Bank is concerned, lastly, that this will not have a major impact, and that is mainly on account of the lower incremental deposits during the period. So, all in all, given these factors, watch out for all of the banks.
Actually, we will be keeping an eye out on all the banks, but since you're here with us, take us through all the brokerage notes that you've been getting in this morning. And after HSBC and Citi last week, JP Morgan has also come out with its India strategy note. So take us through that and all the other notes that that the brokerages have come out with this morning.
Well, yes, let me first start off with Ujjivan Small Finance Bank. We have a note coming in from Investec. Largely what they have highlighted is the fact that the reverse merger could be implemented over the next 3 to 4 months, and the reverse merger offers an arbitrage opportunity in their opinion. The reverse merger is expected to be nearly 12% book value per share accretive, and in fact Ujjivan Small Finance Bank continues to report very strong performance, and that on the back of that we have Investec maintaining a buy rating on the counter with a target price of 56 rupees per share. Apart from that, we also have HDFC Bank in focus on the back of a brokerage note that came in from Goldman Sachs. They have maintained a buy rating on this counter given a target price of 2051, and largely they have highlighted that the overhang around the impact of ICRR is now gone on the bank. The impact of ICRR on HDFC Bank is expected to be in the tune of nearly 400 odd crores as per Goldman Sachs, and in fact the fall in share prices is far more magnified than what the EPS impact warrants. So on the back of that, Goldman Sachs continues to be quite positive on HDFC Bank. They've maintained a buy rating with a target price of 2051 rupees per share. And lastly, let's also focus in on the India strategy note that came in from JP Morgan. Over here, the company has highlighted that the Indian economy could be able to withstand rupees $90 per barrel oil prices. The continued crude increases combined with weaker rainfall could in turn start to weigh on the local equities, and the shift from growth to value, particularly tightening macro conditions, could support a reduction in beta in Indian equity portfolios. Now, as far as the oil factor as well as the rainfall is concerned, they're causing India's macro conditions to deteriorate on the margin. Staples have also tended to be very good defensives, and on the back of that, they continue to be overweight on banks as well as light two-wheeler space for a volume recovery as well. So largely keep an eye out on all these counters on the back of these brokerage notes.
All right, Vamakshi, thank you so much. We will be keeping an eye out on all the stocks that you mentioned. Now, moving on, after the show of strength at the G20 summit, India has proved that its diplomacy is at its best. In fact, the Corridor Pact goes to show that relations with the West Asian countries have been only on the improving trajectory. But how has the relationship evolved, and what's the significance of this corridor? Well, Lisa is joining us to tell us more on that. Take it away, Lisa.
Well, yes, it was a big weekend for India on the back of G20 summit. But the biggest highlight that caught attention was the announcement of the unprecedented infra deals with Saudi Arabia, US, India, as well as European Union. They joined hands and announced multinational rail as well as port deals. Now, as we know, India already enjoys cordial relations with the GCC regions, and Saudi Arabia is the fourth largest trading partner. Even the investment ties with India has grown significantly in recent years. Saudi Arabia's PIF also holds investments in Reliance Jio Platforms, Reliance Retail Ventures, and more recently, companies like L&T as well as Welspun. They won major orders from Saudi Aramco, and it's only going to grow stronger from here on. Coming back to the G20 summit, this is Saudi Prince bin Salman's second visit after 2019, and it's a game changer for India of sorts, because the leaders of United States, India as well as Saudi Arabia, they announced plans to set up rail as well as port links between the Middle East as well as South Asia, and that will eventually connect to Europe, which was termed historic as well as a big deal. Now, why is it considered a big deal? Because it will counter China's ambitious belt as well as road initiative, which is considered a Silk Route for China, and the project also will speed up trade between India as well as Europe by 40% and also reduce the logistic cost. But for now, there were no details about the financing or a time frame for the projects. But the plan would include a slew of data, rail, electricity, hydrogen pipeline projects, and with this, a host of rail as well as pipeline companies like RVNL, Titagar Wagon, APL Apollo Tubes, they are expected to benefit. So yes, we can say that this new spice route of India is likely to become the new spine of global trade.
Absolutely, Lisa. Now, all these rail as well as port links to the rest of the world is going to be a big game changer coming in for India. But let's get a move on with the show then. And here's the news for the hearing impaired.
Exclusive conversation we had with Sunil Bharti Mittal on the back of G20. Our editor, managing editor Nikunj Dalmia got into a conversation with him. Let's take a look at what he had to say about the G20.
Well, it gives me great pleasure now to bring on board a very special guest indeed, Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal, founder and chairperson of Bharti Enterprises and the chair of B20 India Action Council on African Economic Integration. Mr. Mittal, it's a rare pleasure to have you on ET now. Thank you for joining us. It's history in making in India. G20, India's presidency, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, everything seems to be coming together. So do you expect any breakthroughs, and what kind of symbolic impact do you think this G20 summit will have on brand India?
Well, I know at the outset, I would say this has been an absolutely outstanding effort by the Indian Prime Minister Modi ji for having pulled together all the 20 countries, 20 members of G20 to vote on a consensus basis to include African Union as a permanent member of G20. This has been a long-standing desire of the African continent, their aspirations, their needs, and their attention to what is required to lift 1.4 billion people out of poverty have been on the forefront, yet they never got a seat on the table. As soon as India's turn came and India assumed the presidency of G20, our Prime Minister took upon himself to leave at least one big legacy that was focused on Africa. And I would say it's a great day for G20, great day for India, in particular, great endorsement of Prime Minister Modi's leadership on the global stage to have got this particular consensus through by inclusion of AU as a permanent member of G20. So let's start with that and say one big thing done, which will be remembered for the rest of G20's future. The second part I would say is I have seen many G20s. I have participated in a few. There's never been a G20 year like India's had, and probably there never will be one in the future, because our Prime Minister recognized that in today's fractured world where trust deficit is so low, this was a moment to seize, to bring together various countries who are very strong in their own right, on a table to talk about India as one, as world being one family. And I think that message that you have just mentioned is a big message that will go out from G20. And regardless of what other discussions and debates and consensus comes out in the joint statement, this message that world is one family and India's old ethos of ensuring everybody living on this earth is taken care of will resonate for a very long time.
Mr. Mittal, since the African Union has entered G20 now, do you think this will have both short-term, medium-term and long-term implications when it comes to India's relationship, G20's relationship with the African Union, and especially bilateral ties and trade?
I would definitely hope so. India's had historic relations with Africa going over centuries. Indians have settled down in Africa, especially East Africa, over long, long decades. India, in some sense, had lost its engagement with Africa, giving space to countries like China. But in the last, I would say, 10, 15 years, India has changed its gears towards Africa, lifted its support towards Africa. And in the last, I would say, 10 years under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, we have seen much deeper engagement of India into Africa. Our Exim Bank giving soft loans and grants to Africa. Our industry minister, Industry and Commerce Minister, encouraging Indian private sector to go and set up bases in.
Well, that's the exclusive conversation between Sunil Bharti Mittal and the managing editor Nikunj Dalmia. But with that, I'm afraid we're completely out of time on this edition of Market Cafe. But while we bid you goodbye, you don't go anywhere because the market will take all the action ahead.